Hey, it's you, man, from KC95 here. Good evening and welcome to Toasted Tavern. Your host, Scott Tobin, and the man called Wags are ready to bring you the night in sports. So pull up a stool, grab a drink, and let's get toasted.
Well, good evening and welcome into the Toasted Tavern. Wags alongside Scott Tobin for another night in sports across the Midwest, specifically the St. Louis area. And boy, oh boy, Scott, has it been a weekend. We've had college football. We've got a lot of big-time NFL games that were going on. Mercifully, the Cardinals season has ended after a weekend trip to Chicago. Playoff teams and series are set in Major League Baseball. So a lot of stuff to talk about. And that's not even talking about the stuff that we did this weekend as well. How are you doing, man? It's been a long weekend. It's been a long week. Been good to catch up with you and ready to talk sports.
Yeah, man, I'm ready to talk sports, and we definitely have a lot to talk about. You know, you can kind of pick your poison on where we want to start the show because there's so much going on and so much going to happen in the next week to talk about as well. So, to go back to your original question, my weekend was good, really busy, kind of traveling all over the place, as I know you were as well. You were bouncing all over the place yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, I was doing what was pretty big for me. 3 different broadcasts in 3 different venues doing 3 different sports. It was a very, very long Saturday. Went to Harris Stowe for college volleyball, headed over to Centene for Lindenwood women's ice hockey, and then out to SIUE, Ralph Cordy Stadium for Lindenwood men's soccer against SIUE. It was a long, long day, but had a lot of fun. Called another game this afternoon, had 5 broadcasts over the weekend, so it was a very long weekend for me.
Yeah, keeping you busy. You know, when you do 3 sports like that in one day, it gets really confusing. You're calling something, you're like, man, I hope I didn't just like say home run during a touchdown or something. Confused what call you're there sport thing.
Yeah, no, it's I had to check myself a couple of different times, especially going from hockey to soccer because it's a different game, but a lot of the terminology is the same. But you're not hip checking a whole lot in soccer like you are in hockey. So I had to make sure to get the terminology right a couple of different times on the broadcast.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's the thing when you're trying to bounce around and do a bunch of things like that. It's like, man, I got to keep my head straight as to where I'm at, what I'm doing, what's going on. Because it's when you're doing multiple things like that, and I've done that many times myself. It's like, oh man, I gotta remember where I'm at and what I'm doing right now, and names and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge and something I'm not going to do again for a while, probably. Now, would I do it again? Probably, but definitely going to need a couple of months off.
I understand completely.
What about you? What were you up to this week? I know I saw you doing some high school football, but what else did you have to call this weekend?
I had high school football going on, and then I did a little bit of volleyball, and then I did a little bit of softball. So, yeah, I was bouncing all over the place myself, man. So just staying busy, trying to be multifaceted, you know.
Perfect weekend to be out calling sports as well. It was a beautiful outdoor experience. I mean, yesterday was a little warm, I think, but for the most part, it was a good fall weekend to go out and enjoy sports.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, temperatures could be a little bit cooler for my liking, but for the most part, I mean, beautiful sunny days, and and it's not 95 degrees, so you can't complain a whole lot.
No, not at all. All right, let's get into the meat of this show. I'm going to let you choose where we start, whether it's baseball, whether it's college football, whether it's the NFL. You let us. You decide how we want to start things off because, like you said, there's plenty to talk about.
Okay, let's do it like this. Let's do a really quick epitaph to the Cardinals season, and then we can talk about postseason baseball for like 5 minutes, and then we'll jump into all the craziness that's football. How's that sound?
I think that's perfect. Get the worst stuff out of the way early, and then you can focus in on the things that are somewhat exciting. Let's talk about the Cardinals. They wrapped up the season, swept by the Cubs. They had a chance to finish at 500, but went into Chicago, and the Cubs pretty much ended all hopes of 500 or anything positive to end the season. Although you got to say the start today by Kyle Leahy gave you some positive vibes going into next season of him potentially maybe going out for a starter's position for the Cardinals next year. But it was a season to kind of forget, despite the fact that this team was in the playoff race mathematically until the last week of the season. It's the end of Mo, and all I got to say is it's bloom time, man. It's bloom time. Let's go.
Yeah, and the official transition happens on Tuesday as Heim will have his press conference and address the media and kind of talk about his plans for the offseason and the next couple of years. And so that's going to have the attention of Cardinal Nation, I think, because I think we're going to hear some really interesting things come out of his mouth on Tuesday. And first and foremost will be, are we going to have a new manager and coaching staff? I think that's going to be the first thing that will probably be addressed on Tuesday is what direction they go there. And then, I think he'll start talking about the future of what they do during the off season. But, like you said, we need to look back on last year just a little bit. And, like you said, it was a season that you can forget. Although, while it was a frustrating season, we kind of knew it was going to be a frustrating season coming into the season. It's going to be a year where you tried to find some things out about some people, and I think we did. I think Ivan Herrera shocked us all, and I think we have to be really excited about what Ivan Herrera can potentially be as a bat in this lineup. And apparently they're going to try to put him behind the plate again next year. They've got a big plan to strengthen his arm and see how that goes. So I think that's a positive. I think we saw, and I'm going to say before I even say this, I'm going to apologize because I was wrong about Alec Burleson. I really didn't think that he was going to be a consistent everyday type player, and he's proven me wrong the last 2 years. If he can be a 280, 20 homers, 75 RBI guy that gets on base, that's a perfect, 6th, 7th hitter or second hitter in your lineup. So I think you found out about Burleson. I think you found out about Herrera. I think you saw Mason Wynn is an everyday shortstop in the major leagues and a well above average shortstop. And I think his bat showed again that it will play while he was healthy. He was hurt the second half, and so you can't take a whole lot out of that. You saw flashes of positivity out of Nolan Gorman, but, still inconsistency that you'd like to see fixed. And then, there's still questions. Jordan Walker, where are you with Jordan Walker? I don't know that you know anything more than you did going into this year, honestly. You saw some moments, but then he would get hurt, and then he wouldn't be able to bounce back. And then, you heard all the talk about, maybe he doesn't take his preparation seriously enough and different things like that. And then, center field, Victor Scott. You look at it, and he started off, had an amazing spring training, started off the regular season on fire, was hitting the ball all over the place, getting on base, stealing bases. And then it was just like he ran out of gas in the second half. And, I think he only stole, after the All-Star break, I think he only stole 3 bases. His batting average was barely over 160 in the second half. And his defense kind of struggled. And which is a shame because he was, really on pace to be a Gold Glove contender in center field. And then he kind of struggled a little bit in the second half. He dealt with some injuries. So in a long roundabout way, yes, you found some answers on some guys, and I think you have an idea of what you're going to do with some guys. And then some of these guys you're still having questions about, and then it comes down to how much of a teardown are they going to do here? Are you going to move on from Arenado and Sonny Gray, which I think we all believe that they will. I think that's kind of the plan. I think Sonny kind of admitted yesterday that he is now open to being traded, which, I think they need to do. And then, what do you do with a guy like Brendan Donovan? And why won't Wilson Contreras leave? All right, I'm going to throw it to you now. Let's get your thoughts.
I don't know why Wilson Contreras won't leave. I don't understand that at all. But yeah, it sounds like he had a conversation with Ollie and the management, and he's in it for the long haul for some reason. I don't know. For as far as Arenado is concerned, the whole thing with him getting the start in the last home game of the series and then being pulled before the first pitch, I think that tells you all you need to know, that it is going to happen. He will be dealt somewhere for something in this offseason, and Gray, the same situation. So you look at that and you go, yeah, that's going to happen. Again, those question marks, I'll start with Victor Scott. And, I don't want this to sound like I'm comparing him to a guy that's going to go into the Hall of Fame and that he is going to be a Hall of Famer. But he has the same kind of track as Yachty did when he came into this team in this league at the major league level. He came in for his defense, and he's going to find the offense. Now, granted, I think he obviously has a leg up on Yachty because he can steal bases, and even though he didn't steal a whole lot in the second half, that's something he can contribute, even if it means coming off the bench. But he's in there defensively for a reason. He's going to grow into that offensive threat that we think he's going to be. So is it a Hall of Fame career in the future? Probably not, but it's going to be a very good career going forward. So I like to see that. I like the fact that this team, as far as Burleson and Gorman especially, lefties learned how to hit lefties. And that was big because it takes a piece of that question out of, do you have to platoon a guy? Do you have to pull a guy out of a spot in a moment, even though he's hitting well, because he's going up against a lefty? They proved that they can hit lefties, and that's something good going forward. The next step is, what is the youth going to bring? We saw some good flashes from some of the young guys that they brought up this year. I think Michael McGreevy had some good moments. Yeah, he struggled a little bit late in the season. You saw, like I said, with Kyle Leahy, the start that he had today is something that you can build on going forward. And then you've got guys down in the minors that are going to contribute next year. And that makes me sit back and believe that it's not going to be a complete teardown, as much as the track record for Chaim Bloom is going to be a complete teardown and rebuild. Unless you're blown away by something, I don't see how you can move on from a Brendan Donovan and what he brings to this team. He brings excitement. He brings leadership. He's a guy that you want to build a culture around. And I think that's what Bloom has to do in the next 2 years, is build a new culture. And it's not just a culture of winning. It's about a culture of, again, going back to doing things the Cardinal way, the right way. And yes, we're going to get Cubs fans that are going to bitch and moan about the Cardinal way, walking a guy that was a single away from the cycle in a meaningless game for the Cardinals. We're going to get that pushback. But that is the Cardinal way, and they understand that, and I think they need to get back to doing that, and that's stolen bases, that's defense. This is the term no one wants to hear. It's pitch to contact. It's those things that the organization needs to get back to. And I think that's what you're going to get with Bloom, and getting rid of a guy like Donovan, unless it's an absolute haul, is not the right thing. So I think those are the things that we learned this year, is that this team needs some injection of new. I don't know if that means they're going to go out and get a big time name. I mean, obviously Kyle Tucker's a name that gets thrown out there, but injuries scare me. And Tucker, with his injuries this year, and the fact that you're going to have a lot of suitors coming after him, doesn't make me feel comfortable with him coming to St. Louis for the right number. But I look at that, and I take the positives of what we saw from the youth and the change of culture that we're hopefully going to see going forward as being the wins for this season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think I don't know that we're going to see a whole lot of signings free agent wise this offseason. I think it's going to be a year where you're going to see changes and you're going to see new players, but I think most of that's going to come through trade. Honestly, I think that's how the biggest move we're going to have. And real quickly, go back to Brendan Donovan. I think the two biggest things that are going to tell us a lot about where the Cardinals are is what they do with Brendan Donovan and what they do with Lars Nootbaar. Because I agree with you. I think Brendan Donovan's the guy you want to keep here. I think he's the guy that you build your culture around. We kept hearing Wilson Contreras say, oh, well, they need a veteran to build their culture around. Is Wilson Contreras really the veteran that you want to build your culture around? I mean, let's be honest. The guy's not a winning ball player. I mean, he came up. Yeah, he won a World Series with the Cubs. But, I mean, think about it. He came up with the Cubs team that was supposed to be a dynasty. Him and Rizzo and Bryant and all of those guys, Baez, and they flamed out. And they all left, and the Cubs traded all of them, and they were stuck with Wilson because every year at the trade deadline, they wanted to trade him, and nobody else wanted him. And you would basically hear that other teams really weren't going to meet the asking price that the Cubs had for him. And so, yes, they were supposed to be a dynasty. They had 2 really good years. Then they fell apart, and Contreras played through all of that. Then the Cardinals signed him, and you've had 3 losing seasons with Wilson Contreras as a Cardinal. So, I mean, he's played like 10 years in the major leagues now, and he's been on 2 winning ball clubs. So is that really the guy that you want to build your culture around when you already know that he's got a kind of surly reputation as his personality anyway? I think Brendan's the guy you want to build around. But if you're looking at this team, if Bloom's looking at this team going, okay, my plan is in 5 years, we're going to be really good, then you probably say, okay, Brendan, we love you. We want you here. But keeping you here doesn't do us a whole lot of good, because by the time we're ready to compete and really build that culture, you're going to be at the tail end of your career. You're going to be past your prime. And yeah, you could be a good leadership guy, but is it really worth it at that point when we can bring in new guys now and try to speed up that process? And the same thing with Nootbaar. I think you and I are both on the same page that we would be fine if they traded Lars Nootbaar no matter what. Yep. But, I think it's kind of the same situation there, that if it's going to be 4 or 5 years before you're competing in Bloom, hopefully it's not, but if that's Bloom's timeline, then I think you do have to move on from both of those guys. And maybe even if that's the case, maybe even Burleson you have to look at and say, okay, yeah, we really like you, but by the time we're really ready to compete, you're not going to be a major cog. Those things are what we really have to look at, and we're going to know a lot more about that from after we hear what he has to say on Tuesday.
Do you think Cardinals fans are going to accept a 5-year timeline from Bloom? Because, we've already been in this circle for the last couple of years now at the end of Mo's term. And yes, you got to give the guy some time to put his stamp on it. I mean, I talk about this all the time when you've got new coaches in, it's a 3-year process, especially collegiate coaches, 3-year process. Year 1, you've got pretty much all players that are not yours. Year 2, you got a mix of the two. By year 3, you've got your players in your system going. The Cardinals fans are already rabid, and I know it's a lot of built up animosity towards Mo, which is why it's probably ramped up a little bit this year. But are they going to accept a 5-year plan from Bloom if it means getting rid of players? I know you and I are on the same page as Nootbaar, but getting rid of players that are fan favorites like a Nootbaar, like a Donovan, like a guy like Burleson has become, God forbid, a Mason Wynn. I mean, are they going to accept that and allow that to happen to have that success later on down the line? Or is Bloom kind of in the situation where he goes, I want to go this way, but I want to keep my job and I want people to like me in a sense, so I maybe have to push things a little bit?
Well, I think, we talk about that and we say Brendan Donovan's a fan favorite and we say Mason Wynn's a fan favorite, but have they been here long enough and have Cardinal fans been excited about this team enough in the last couple of years for those guys to be on the same level as, it would have been, say, if you traded, Jimmy Edmonds or an Albert Pujols? You know what I'm saying? Not that those guys are on that same level, but have the fans really wrapped themselves around these young guys? Because fans have been frustrated for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, to a certain extent, I don't think fans in St. Louis have ever truly wrapped their arms around Nolan Arenado the way we thought they would, because of the fact that he came in already when fans were sour with things and he didn't immediately win. They got to the postseason, but the first year he was here, it was a 1 game and they lost to the Dodgers. And then in 22, Albert kind of carried it. Everybody was bitter because Goldie and Arenado stopped hitting as the postseason started, and Albert kind of carried that team in September. And then, we had the disaster with Helsley and the Phillies in that 2-game series. So I don't have really embraced any of these guys the way that, we think of Cardinal fans embracing them. So I'm not really sure if Cardinal fans would be all that upset if anybody got moved. And while you say, 5 years is a long time and will they accept it? I mean, we've heard Cardinal fans begging for him to tear it down for 2 or 3 years. And, attendance was down almost 1 million people this year. I mean, is it really, how much farther is it going to drop in the next couple of years while you rebuild? Is it something that the franchise can look at and go, okay, we already know it's going to be a loss. We can trade all these guys, cut salary, bring in a bunch of young kids, and it's really not going to hurt us if fans don't show up for the next couple of years while we try to put this back together because we have no payroll. So, while fans aren't going to be happy about it, fans have also been clamoring for it for the last couple of years. Sell everybody, trade everybody, get them all out of here, start over. So, you can't have it both ways. Fans wanted this. Now you can't bitch about how long it takes to get it back to where we all expect Cardinal baseball to be.
So it's time for fans to put up or shut up, essentially. And if you wanted this to happen and it does, then you have to live with the results because you're essentially getting what you wanted, and we'll see how it plays out. All right. We'll talk more about the Cardinals next week after Chaim Bloom's press conference on Tuesday. We'll have a little bit more information on kind of the direction this franchise is going and all of that kind of stuff under his leadership. So we're going to kind of put a semi-bow on the Cardinals season after it wrapped up to the sweep of the Cubs by the Cubs. So, we'll move on past that. And let's talk a little bit about the MLB playoffs, because the Cardinals fan base is not the only fan base that is kind of up in arms at the end of the regular season. Let's talk about the highest payroll in baseball blowing a lead in a division and not making the playoffs. The New York Mets, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, they are pond scum, and yes, they are a bitter rival, but holy cow, they may be in worse shape than the Cardinals are in.
Yeah, it can't be fun to be a Mets fan right now. I mean, you put all that money in, you go out and invest in Juan Soto and put all that money into that, and he's supposed to be the savior. You re-sign Pete Alonso, you add to your pitching, and then you go out at the trade deadline and get Ryan Helsley and 2 other stud relief pitchers and make all kinds of other moves, and then you literally fall flat on your face and miss out in the postseason to the Reds. Oh, yeah. Things in New York can't be good right now.
Pete Alonso has already opted out for next year as well. So that's a big piece to come out after the regular season finale as well. So they are going to have to figure that out. And yeah, they ended up losing it out to the Reds, who clinched the final spot with the loss to Miami today by the Mets. So the Reds are going to be playing the Dodgers in the first round. Padres are going to be playing the Cubs. And then Phillies and Brewers await on that side. On the other side, in the American League, another epic collapse, but it didn't finish them. And that's the Detroit Tigers. They had a massive lead in the AL Central and ended up blowing that lead. Cleveland ends up coming away with the AL Central title. Now, the Tigers do still get into the playoffs as a wild card, and they're going to face the Guardians in the first round. So, again, you look at the Tigers and you go, at the very least, you still made the playoffs, but you're worried going into this first round.
Oh, absolutely. But how much fun are those first rounds in the American League going to be? You got a Yankees-Red Sox first round matchup, and then you have the Tigers and the Indians, a rivalry in the city. That's going to be fun. But, I mean, you look at this playoff field, and you go, we say it all the time, you get in the playoffs, anybody can win it. I mean, it is wide open this year. I mean, absolutely anybody that's in can win because, the Dodgers underachieved for the most part this year. I mean, yeah, they won, but, they weren't the Dodger team that everybody expected them to be with all the money they spent on pitching. The Padres are going to be interesting. The Cubs could be interesting. I mean, the Reds, honestly, could surprise people in the playoffs. We know it seems like a broken record, but, the Brewers get in the playoffs every year and then they can't score runs. So, can Milwaukee find a way to score at all in the postseason? How does that play out? It's going to be really interesting to see. But I think, this is one of those years where you look at it and go, man, anybody can win. And, the team that should scare people when you look at the postseason and go, what team in both leagues has the most dynamic pitching and has some guys that could absolutely go off in the postseason? And if I'm looking around, I'm going, holy crap, I'm scared to death of the Seattle Mariners because that pitching staff could absolutely shut everybody down in the postseason. And then, Julio Rodriguez could go off. Randy Arozarena could go off. Suarez. I mean, you've got guys in that lineup that could absolutely get red hot with that pitching staff, and Seattle could go on a run and be looking at a World Series.
And that's not even mentioning, Cal Raleigh, the catcher that has just been unbelievable this year. Probably going to win the AL MVP award. Yeah. He set the record for most home runs by a catcher. So, I mean, you didn't even mention him, and that's another piece that Seattle has as well. And I know fans in Seattle are saying, please don't pick us. Please, we don't want that high expectation. We're glad we're the 2 seed. We're not the 1 seed and have to worry about being the one that lost everything. That's the Toronto Blue Jays issue. And how about the Toronto Blue Jays, man? Quietly, the best record in the American League. No one is talking about them, and that might be perfect for them.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a team that you have to watch out for too. With a team that can absolutely go on a run. Vladdy gets hot, Bichette gets hot. That lineup can Springer. That lineup can absolutely go crazy, and then they have some solid pitching too. So yeah, Toronto could be a team that surprises people in the postseason. It's going to be really interesting, man. It is absolutely wide open, and I don't think there's a betting favorite, honestly, in either league.
And who wants to see a Blue Jays Phillies World Series, a rematch of 1993? That would be really cool to see, and it's potentially possible because the Phillies as the 2 seed could be another one of those teams that kind of isn't talked about enough and sneak into a World Series berth again. And we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be an interesting playoff year this year for Major League Baseball. Okay, let's jump into college football. Another big weekend, and could have set up a bigger weekend here in 2 weeks locally, but have to get through next week for a couple of teams before we get to that. But let's dive into the new rankings this week after some upsets that took place. Ohio State, number 1 overall. They got 46 of the first place votes. They stayed at number 1. Miami dropped down to 3. Oregon jumped ahead up to number 2 from the 6th spot. Big jump for Ole Miss. They took down LSU and jumped from 13 up to 4. And a couple other teams that jumped into the top 10 that were outside of it. Indiana, Texas was at 10. They're now at 9. Alabama, with their win over Georgia, jumps up to number 10 from 17. Georgia drops to 12 from 5th. LSU to 13th from 4th. Mizzou, up only 1 spot, up to 19 from 20, but they did what they needed to do against their opponent, UMass, on Saturday night. It sets up a big-time potential match not this Saturday, but next Saturday in Columbia, because Alabama is coming to town, and they got a tough test. They're going to be playing number 16 Vanderbilt at Vandy this weekend. But if Alabama is able to win that game, you may see game day coming to Como in 2 weeks. And if we saw anything in that game a couple weeks ago when the other group was there, when game day comes in and Pat McAfee and Nick Saban with Alabama, watch out. Columbia may sink into the ground because of the amount of people that are going to be there.
Well, I'm going to make this prediction right now. I know there's a fine, and Mizzou will tell you absolutely no fans stormed the field. If Alabama beats Vandy this week and comes into Columbia, and Mizzou beats Alabama on a Saturday night in primetime television in Columbia, Missouri, people at Harpo's may run down the street and storm the field when that game's over. I mean, there's going to be no stopping it if they win, and there shouldn't be. If they beat Alabama on that Saturday night, I want to see like 100,000 people on the field at Faurot Field.
I mean, and honestly, if every one of them pitches in $5, fines paid for. You're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it could be one of those nights where the goalposts end up at Harpo's, like that has in the past after big win. That's what happened when they beat Oklahoma in primetime, a decade ago on a Saturday night. The goalposts were sitting in Harpo's parking lot after that game.
Well, the nice thing is Mizzou is going to have the bye this week, and I know a lot of people are going, that's great. That means they can get healthy. They can rest up. They can take 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama. Am I the only one that is scared of the fact that they do have a bye before this big-time matchup against the Crimson Tide? In the fact that complacency may be able to set in, and if you start slow against Alabama, they have the ability to just put a stranglehold on you and just prevent you from doing anything. I'm worried about the bye before a big game. Is there any worry in your mind, or do you feel like with what they have going on and who they have on this team that no one should worry about a bye week leading into this game?
I mean, there's always a little worry about it, but and the opposite effect, you've got 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama. You got to look at it that way. They have to go on the road and play Vandy. They have to go on the road and play Vandy next week, which is going to be tough in a physical battle. And like you said, you can't take Vandy lightly, especially there with the way they're playing. This year they've scored 50 plus the last 2 weeks. I mean, that's a scary team. And that's something Mizzou's going to have to look out for down the road. But I think the 2 weeks, you've got plenty of time to prepare. I think it also gives you a chance to make sure you're completely healthy. We saw Ahmad Hardy come off the field yesterday early in that game with a little bit of an injury. I mean, he got on the bike and got back out there and played, 3 quarters and scored 3 touchdowns, and it seemed like he was okay. But I think that extra week is big for that. I think it just gives you an extra week to really prepare, to film study. I think there will be no excuses for them not to be absolutely 110% ready for Alabama. I mean, they should have every play memorized on what Alabama has done the last couple of weeks when that game happens on Saturday. So there's positives to it, but like you said, you always worry about it a little bit, the rust factor. At least they were able to keep, at least as crazy as this sounds, they played kind of flat enough last night. And to say they played flat and you win 42-6 sounds kind of crazy. People are like, wait, what? But I don't think they played a perfect game last night, which wasn't necessarily a horrible thing because it kept your starters in the game for almost 3 quarters, so you don't have as much rust as you would have if, say, you pulled them at halftime or after the first quarter and then sat for 2 weeks before you played. So I think in some ways that was a positive, but I think just everything that this team has built the last couple of years, I think it's all in a lot of ways. I think it's all culminating in this game against Alabama. I think the whole STP something to prove model that they've run it the last couple of years, all the sellouts, all the everything, I think it's all built up to this showdown. And we can talk about it again. They won last night. They're now 26-5 in their last 31 games. There's only 3 teams in the country that have won more games than Mizzou has in the last 31 games. And one of them is Ohio State, who we beat. You've got a 17-game winning streak at home, which is you've got the longest winning streak at home in the country right now. You're tied for the winning streak in the country at home right now. Everything is built for this to be Mizzou's coming out party. And, by no means am I saying this is going to be easy. It's not. It's still Alabama, but this isn't Nick Saban's Alabama. This isn't that unbeatable juggernaut that Saban ran around for decades. This is still Alabama, and it's still going to be really, really tough. But it's not the Bama that scares you like they did, with Saban. There's that feeling that, okay, they're really good, but hey, you know what? I think we can play with these guys. And the fact that Mizzou has the offensive and defensive lines that they have, I don't think Alabama's going to be able to push them around. And, if Mizzou can generate that running game, and I can't see anybody stopping Ahmad Hardy completely, I think that's going to keep Mizzou in this game. If you're able to run the ball and you don't have to become one-dimensional, I just think everything's lining up for Mizzou to win. And I'm knocking on wood when I say that because I know people are like, shh, I can't believe you just said that. I honestly think that everything we've seen, everything we've talked about since Luther Burden got to Mizzou and we said, okay, this is the turning point. I think it'll culminate in 2 weeks. And I don't know if you saw it today, but Mizzou got a commitment from the number 2 JUCO transfer in the country going to Mizzou, and kid from UCLA who's a 4-star decommitted and is coming to go to Mizzou for a visit. And they've got 2 more 4-star. I mean, this thing is building into a national power that I don't know that a lot of us even imagined was possible 5 or 6 years ago. So I just think it's just building. And like I said, I think 2 weeks from now we could be sitting here in 2 weeks on a Sunday night going, oh my God, Mizzou's finally in the national conscience of this is a really good team and they've got a shot playing the playoffs and they may be a national championship contender. And like I said, knock on wood, that's really how I feel.
Well, and you admitted that, you were wrong about Alec Burleson. I questioned Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, I knew he was a good recruiter. He had success at where he's been in the past, but in the first couple of years, it never seemed like he could win that game. And it was more of a, can he coach in that game? Well, he used his powers of recruiting and talking to get guys in that can win those games. And he's got a coaching staff that will help get him into that moment. And yes, maybe he still will have a call that you go, oh man, why did you do that? But he has grown as a coach as well. And he has turned into that guy that can win the game. And another piece about potentially having the game day crew here for that game against Alabama is Nick Saban will be here. He will be there at that game. And you have to think that Coach DeBoer is going to second guess some of the things that he does in that game because Nick Saban is here watching. And if I do something wrong, I'm going to hear about it. Not to say that Saban's calling him up every week going, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. But that psyche is going to be there that the guy that built Alabama to this is here watching me. And if I lose this game, it's not going to look good. It may cost me my job. And he's successful at Alabama, but it may cost him his job in a sense. So that's another factor that has to be thought about when you have game day coming in and Saban in the building. Alabama may be a little skittish, and that could help Mizzou as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. The players have to look at this as it's just another game, and you've got to go out and treat it like game week and game night, and just not buy into all the hype around. But it's definitely going to be quite an event in Columbia in 2 weeks.
Well, we can't talk college football without talking about the team just across the river as well. Illinois, they got whooped by Indiana last week, and they hosted number 21 USC in Champaign, and they put on a heck of a performance. They came away with a 34-32 victory. So we can't gloss over the fact that Illinois rebounded nicely after the shellacking that Indiana put on them a week before. So they get to move to 4-1. They're 1-1 in the Big Ten, and they are another team that you kind of have to look at as maybe potentially being a team that sneaks into the playoffs as well. And it goes back to could you imagine a college football playoff game either in Columbia between Mizzou and Illinois or in Champaign between Mizzou and Illinois? And right now that's still a possibility.
Yeah, you have to give Illinois a ton of credit for their ability to bounce back and beat us they did and to win on the last second field goal, find the ability after a couple of tough turnovers to fight back and get in that game. And then, like I talked about, Mizzou fans storming the field. We saw that happen in Champaign yesterday. The Illinois kids hit the field when that field goal went through at the last second in Illinois. So, yeah, to see what Illinois has done is impressive. And if we could get a Mizzou-Illinois playoff game, that would be an amazing thing. So, hopefully the Illini can keep rolling. They've got some big games still ahead on their schedule. And, we saw again this week in college football that it's wide open and anything can happen because you look at, 4 top 10s lost, and then you look at Indiana barely escaped through Georgia Tech, barely got by, Tennessee barely got by. I mean, you had so many teams that it came to the last second or overtime to stay alive that almost got knocked off by unranked teams. So, again, like we talked about Major League Baseball being wide open, college football playoff is going to be absolutely crazy because anybody that gets in is going to have a chance to win the championship because there is not that clear dominant number one team, I don't believe.
All right, one final thing on college football. I just want to get your thoughts on this statement right here. Arkansas interim head coach Bobby Petrino.
Wait, what?
Interim Arkansas head coach Bobby Petrino. Yes.
That's why not? I guess is all I can say to that. I mean, it's sort of kind of worked in the past in Arkansas, I guess. So if they want to go down that road again, I guess. I mean, after you saw what happened against Notre Dame last week, you roll the dice and see what happens. Just don't let him get on any motorcycles, I guess, with students or anything like that.
Yeah, so Arkansas did fire Sam Pittman today, and they named Petrino as the interim head coach. So we'll see how that plays out for Arkansas and for Petrino. Cool. This is just another interesting storyline for Arkansas, who just seems to continue to play like sixth fiddle in the SEC. They're the team that, you know, isn't in the news, and then they do something crazy that you wouldn't expect anybody to do, but then you look at it and you go, yep, that's Arkansas.
Sorry, man, I'm not going to lie to you. I just completely lost you there for 2 seconds. What was that?
That's okay. I was just saying that Arkansas is the sixth fiddle in the SEC, and, you know, they'll do something that you don't think anybody would do, and then you read the headline and you go, yep, that's Arkansas.
Yeah, I just kind of, you just kind of have to shake your head and go, wow, that's something I did not see coming. But while we're talking about Arkansas, not sort of tied to Arkansas, but not directly, Notre Dame put an absolute beating on them yesterday. Got to throw some love to our Missouri running back from Notre Dame, who did something that had never happened at Notre Dame in its football history. Remind Love was the first player in Notre Dame history to score 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 receiving touchdowns in a game. Had never happened in the history of Notre Dame football, and he did it yesterday against Arkansas. So congratulations to the St. Louis kid, and, you know, soon to be first round pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah, but do you really want to get picked by the team that's going to pick you in the first round of the NFL draft? We'll have to see how that plays out. And that's a perfect segue into the NFL, because it is week 4, and it has been another interesting week in the league, because you got international games now. You've got teams that are playing backup quarterbacks. You're starting to see some injuries pop up. And I'm sorry, New York Giants fans, you will have to probably mute things here in just a little bit when we talk about the Giants game against the Chargers today. And then you've got teams that are trying to turn around a bad start to the season that they expected not to go this way. And we'll talk about that Ravens-Chiefs game here in a little bit as well. But let's just start with the early game today. And it was an early game. It was the first game in Dublin, Ireland, Pittsburgh and Minnesota. Steelers almost gave that one away today to Carson Wentz and the Vikings.
Yeah, I have some serious questions about some of the things that Mike Tomlin decided to do in the fourth quarter in that game, because he almost, like you said, gave that game away. How do you decide to go for it on like the 4-yard line with under 2 minutes left, and you decide, hey, you know what? Let's try to run the ball up the middle. No, that was a horrible decision. You got stopped, you know, on the 1-yard line, and you saw Minnesota turn around and march right down the field and almost come back and win this game. Real quickly, though, I have to admit, I'm going to say I was wrong once again, because as much as this pains me to say it, Aaron Rodgers looks pretty darn good as a Steeler quarterback.
He really does. He's healthy. He's got, and you know what I think he needed? He needed a bombastic wide receiver that doesn't give ish about anything and runs his mouth as a catalyst to improve himself, apparently, because he's got that in George Pickens, and it seems to have worked. And he's got a running game, and things are looking well for Rodgers right now. And the coexistence with him and Tomlin so far has worked. The real question is going to be, we get midway through the season, you get into the latter stages of the year, and something doesn't go right. How is Rodgers going to react to something Tomlin does?
Yeah, and we could have seen that if that game had gone sideways, which it almost did in that fourth quarter. If that touchdown they didn't score because you took the ball out of Rodgers' hands and ran it instead of letting him throw. If Minnesota marches down and scores there, which they did, and then they get the ball back and drive down the field, and the game ended on interception. But if that doesn't happen, if Minnesota marches down that field, kicks that field goal, goes to overtime, and wins, then there's going to be like 3 questions that was Tomlin doing? Why didn't I get to throw the ball? Why blah blah blah? You would have seen that. There would have been that friction right there, and so they dodged a bullet there, but very easily we could have had Aaron Rodgers running his mouth saying something stupid today had that game gone a little bit differently at the end.
Yeah, we certainly could. But the Steelers do hang on to that one, 24-21 victory over the Vikings. The earlier games today, you look at, the Falcons and Commanders game. That one was an interesting one. Falcons were coming off the shutout loss to Carolina the week before. Panthers got blown out by New England today. But Michael Penix Jr. and his group able to put together a real nice game against the Commanders. Yes, they were without their starting quarterback and their top wide receiver. They still put together a pretty good offensive game with Marcus Mariota under center, but love to see the bounce back from the Falcons and then the continued growth of Michael Penix Jr. as well. We figured he was going to be a solid quarterback after what we saw in college, but today really solidified that he's got a legit case to be a starter in the NFL, and he's got a good group of receivers with him. Although I'm pretty sure today Drake London was the first non-running back to catch a touchdown pass for the Falcons today. So it took till week 4, but the Falcons receivers are on the board as well.
Yeah, and like you said, Penix is definitely growing and maturing, and he's progressing, which is what you want to see. And, the Falcons are the perfect case of that dome state. I mean, they are just a completely different team when you put them inside and you put them in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. I'm not sure if it's called stadium or dome, but their dome stadium in Atlanta, they just play better. And you saw that again this week. You get them outside, and it's a completely different ball club, which, we see that happen a lot of times with dome teams. But it's been the case in Atlanta for as long as I can remember, going back to Michael Vick and those teams. They played so much better inside than they do outside because they're not as fast on grass as they are on turf and all of those things. But Falcons look good. Washington, like you said, Mariota played pretty solid again. That's 2 weeks in a row. But that the Commanders are dying to get Jaden Daniels back as quickly as possible and hope that he's healthy and kind of right the ship there. But yeah, that was a good game. There were a lot of interesting games today. Is it safe to say that we won't ever see Russell Wilson touch the field in New York again after Jackson Dart wins against the undefeated Chargers in his NFL debut?
Well, yes and no at the same time. I worry about if Jackson Dart can stay healthy. He had a moment where it looked like maybe he had a bit of a hamstring issue, and that would probably be the only worry that I would have. Is his game is predicated on his legs, and if his hamstring is giving him issues, it could go wrong, and you may see Wilson hit the field. But that being said, it's only going to take an injury for Russell Wilson to get back on the field because Dart did everything right. The only problem is he's going to have to do it now without his top wide receiver. And Giants fans, you can mute and throw stuff now because we're going to talk about the fact that Malik Neighbors very likely tore his ACL today in the game and is done for the season. And that is a huge blow for the Giants because He was everything for that team. On the positive side, though, they still have guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, who could pick up the slack a little bit there. Cam Scatterbo is very, very good as well. So they've got some young, exciting players. You just have to make sure that you recognize that without Malik Neighbors, those guys now are going to be targeted by the defense a lot more, and Neighbors is not going to take away some of that pressure. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react to that. Now, today against the Chargers, they did a good job of that. They held defensively, they held the Chargers in check and kept Justin Herbert from really going off, and they managed the game offensively. I believe I heard on the way home today from my latest broadcast that they won the time of possession game. They had the ball for 35 minutes. Yes, they didn't score much. They scored 21 points in the game, but they possessed the ball and kept it out of the hands of the Chargers, and that's what you're going to have to do going forward to win games.
Yeah, that's definitely going to have to be their blueprint. And, you talk about the Giants, they've got a pretty talented defensive line. They've got a couple of first-round picks, including Abdul Carter, who they drafted this year in the first round out of Penn State. So you've got a solid defensive line that can create pressure. I think if I'm the Giants and Neighbors is going to be out for a decent amount of time, if I'm Brian Daboll, I'm going, okay, we've got to come up with a way to get Cam Scatterboom the ball 25, 30 times as often as possible and almost focus our offense around him, make him the piece, because we've seen in college and we've seen when he's touched the field in these first 4 weeks that he can be an electric player. And so I think that would be my goal if I'm Daboll, as I'm game planning for the next few weeks without Neighbors.
Well, and then you have to look at potentially the trade market as well, especially if you feel like you can win your division, because no one expected the Giants to win today. They do, and now they have their first win of the season, but they're in a division that you've got Dallas, who's Dallas. You've got Washington, who has missed Jaden Daniels the last 2 weeks, and who knows how many other games he may miss this year as well. So you've got that. So it's a potentially, I'm not going to sit there and say the Giants are going to win the division, but it is a potential division that you could finish second in and get a wild card, because you got Philadelphia sitting up at the top, and they're 4-0, somewhat surprisingly in a sense. They had to hold off the Rams last week and win on a blocked field goal. They had the lead, but it sealed it. Today, they had to hold off the Buccaneers. They had a big-time lead and then let the Bucs come back. That's a big credit to Baker Mayfield. But it's something you have to worry about if you're an Eagles fan, because this team, yes, has shown that they can start scoring, but A.J. Brown, after a big game last week, did nothing today. And then you get into the second half, and you stop scoring. They scored 7 points in the second half this week and allowed Tampa Bay to put up 19. So, yes, Philadelphia is 4-0. The Giants are only 1-3, but it's a division where if things flip a little bit, the Giants could be right in it. Not saying, again, they're going to win it, but it's a possibility they can put some pressure on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talk about that Eagles game. The Eagles had that game well in hand, and then all of a sudden, like we've seen him do in the past, 2 possessions in a row, Baker Mayfield threw a 73-yard touchdown, and then in the next possession, he threw a 74-yard touchdown. And so, you see him lead that team, and then he drove them down to the field with like 3 minutes left in the game. They had first and goal from the 5, and he breaks 2 tackles, and he's falling backward and tries to make a play and throws an interception in the end zone. And so they were right there to tie that game, and he just made it. He tried to force a play that he should have either taken the sack or thrown the ball out of bounds, but he was trying to make something happen through the interception. And you're like, oh man, there's the bad part of Baker Mayfield. Then their defense stops Philadelphia. They get the ball back. They have a 4th and 7. Baker keeps the ball, somehow gets out of the pocket, breaks like 4 tackles, and gets the first down all by himself. Like, it's like, how did he get out of the pocket? How did he make that happen? And he drove down the field. They didn't score, obviously, lost the game. But it's like, you see the good and the bad in Baker Mayfield, and the guy's just fun to watch because, they lost today, but they were undefeated going into that game, and they were undefeated because of him, because he brought them back in the 3 games. But he's just an exciting quarterback to watch, and as a guy who is a Browns fan, still the dumbest thing the Cleveland Browns have ever done is trade Baker Mayfield and go, hey, it would be a good idea. Let's trade Baker, who got us to the playoffs this year, and let's get Sean Watson and then give him the biggest contract in NFL history. Let's see how that works out.
Yeah, it hasn't, and for everything we've seen too, not only is he a dynamic football player, but he's also Baker Mayfield seems to be a really good guy too. Someone that would be out in the community doing things and all of that. Just seems like a good person as well. So, yeah, they lost, but Tampa Bay's got a gem down there, and you got to watch out down there in the South. I mean, they're very likely going to win that division. Atlanta seems like they will challenge them, but it's just a 2-horse race there. And I think right now, just because of his inexperience, Michael Penix is probably not going to lead that team to a division title. I'm going to leave it in the hands of Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay, but it's going to be a fight for sure. A couple other games to talk about real quick. Rams beat the Colts, hand them their first loss on a late touchdown. Jaguars 3-1. They go into San Francisco and win. Brock Purdy was back today for the 49ers. You think maybe after that late second win last week against Arizona, they can start building something, getting their guy back in. But Jacksonville had a big game today. They take the win. Bears find a way to beat the Raiders, which that's a big one for them as well. It gets them to 2-2. So a couple of big wins there. And then the Chiefs. We got to talk about the Chiefs. They proved something today that looked to me like they couldn't do, and they found a way to beat Baltimore, and they beat them handily as well. Patrick Mahomes had the game he's been looking for all year. 25 of 37, 270 yards, 4 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy was back. He put up 83 yards receiving as well. They finally got things going, and you look at that game and you go, the Ravens are 1-3. Do you have to worry about their defense because they've been giving up a lot of points this year? And the other side of the coin, the Chiefs now have put together pretty much a complete offensive game. And yes, still a long way to go, but you get Worthy back. That slots other guys into spots. Hollywood Brown had a decent game. Travis Kelce had another good game as well. You've got the running back situation kind of figured out. It's one game, but you now know that the Chiefs seem to be back. So I think the biggest question mark coming out of this game is, are you more confident in the Chiefs going forward, or are you more worried about the Baltimore Ravens and their defense going forward?
Well, you have to be worried about the Ravens because they've got so many injuries. Kyle Van Noy is hurt. A couple other defensive linemen are hurt. They had 4 starters not able to play today. And, so that's a big worry. And then Lamar got hurt today. Lamar didn't play at the end of that game. He had an injury. And so you have to worry about, what happens if Lamar's not able to play. That's a huge blow, because going into this week, I said this game was more important to Kansas City than Baltimore because I thought Baltimore was good enough that, even at 1-3, they would be able to turn things around and win the division. Whereas with Kansas City, I was like, man, I don't know. I'm not sure. After today, you have to look at it and go, wow, how quickly things change, because now you have to be worried about Baltimore because, how long do those injuries on defense linger? How seriously injured is Lamar, and how much does that, even if he's able to play and not 100%, how much does that affect what he's able to do on the field? And so that has to be a big worry, especially with the Steelers playing the way they've played so far. I mean, think about this. I mean, you look at now and we said, oh, man, it's going to be Baltimore and maybe Cincinnati, and who knows, maybe Cleveland does something. And, Aaron Rodgers with the Steelers, are they going to be any good? Now you look at that division and it's the Steelers, and then, there's nobody else really going to be able to do much because, Joe Burrow's out for how long, and, the Browns are the Browns. And, now with Lamar potentially hurt and all of those injuries, I mean, it may be the Steelers division to run away with in the AFC North, which will be crazy. And then you talked about Chiefs, what a huge day for them. We saw their offense seem to start to click a little bit against the Giants in the second half last week. We saw, Lamar. Saw Patrick hit a couple of deep throws. And then, like you said, they came out this week, and you had Worthy. They had one drive where 3 balls in a row he threw deep to Worthy. He hit 1, 2 were incomplete, but it just opened things up. And then all of a sudden, defenses start thinking about, man, we can't let Worthy or any of these wide receivers get behind us. And then what happens? All of a sudden, the middle of the field opens up for Travis Kelce, and you saw Kelce have 5 catches and 58 yards today. Weird how that works. And then the running game was able to pick it up a little bit too, because defenses have to start thinking about that deep pass and worried about those things. So, the Chiefs offense all of a sudden opens up. And like you said, you got Worthy back. You're going to get Rice back sometime in October, potentially. So, things are looking up for them. Plus, the Chargers lose today. So, the Chiefs pick it up. All of a sudden they're 2-2 and the Chargers fall to 3-1. And, all the people that thought, oh man, Kansas City's done and the sky is falling, they're now just a game out of first place, and everything looks a whole lot brighter in Chief Kingdom.
Yeah, it certainly does. And that's why, you caution people about getting too wrapped up in the first handful of games, because it's now an even longer season, and there's time to kind of get things worked out and all of that. You get healthy, you get guys back from suspension, what have you. You can't freak out after a couple of games. And that goes for Baltimore right now as well. Yes, you're 1-3, you're sitting back in your division, but it is through 4 games. So things can turn around. You still got divisional games against, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. So things aren't necessarily bleak yet. But like you said, depending on how some of those injury scenarios shake out, it could get a little bit dicey here soon. Going on right now, Sunday Night Football, Packers leading the Cowboys 7-0. And just taking a quick look at the statistics in that one, you got one quarterback that's 9 of 11, 137 yards and 1 touchdown. You got another quarterback that's 3 for 4 for 15 yards. I'm going to give you a guess as to which quarterback is which.
I'm going to say, as crazy as it sounds, I'm going to say that Dak had the better stats.
No, Dak has 15 yards passing right now because the Packers are leading 7-0 in the second quarter, and they are driving right now. They're in Cowboys territory.
Because usually, Dak throws for like 1 million yards and they have 7 points and they're getting blown out 48-7 or something.
I mean, honestly, it looks like right now that Dallas has probably had 1 possession, maybe 2, because he's only 3 of 4. So that tells me right there that they've had 1, maybe 2 possessions. They've got 5 minutes of possession time right now. So it looks like Jordan Love is doing his best game management impression and just holding on the ball and leading the offense slowly and methodically. So still second quarter, still anything can happen. And we've seen Dallas come back in games. So not a complete finish there in that one. And then we've got 2 Monday night games tomorrow. You've got the winless Jets and Dolphins. Yes, even though they're winless, the game still will be played. People probably won't be watching it, but it still will be played. And then you got the Bengals and the Broncos, as the Broncos look to get back to 500 and the Bengals look to move to 3-1 and stay with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now in that division. I guarantee you I know which game you're watching tomorrow, and that is going to be the second one, correct?
Nope, I'm going with the first one. No, I'm kidding. Yes, no, I will be watching the Broncos and the Bengals. Although I may watch the Jets because there is still a chance that there is an active quarterback from the St. Louis area on that Jets roster that you never know. We could see in the game at some point tomorrow.
Very well could. And how awesome would it be to see Brady Cook out there throwing it on the NFL football field, and then maybe he gets down to Columbia in a couple weeks, has a little guest appearance, and then who knows? I mean, you know what? I'm going to pull it up right now. I got to look at the Jets schedule. I got to see when their bye week is. Let's see. Does it say on here? No, it doesn't say on here. So let's see. This upcoming week would be the 4th. They're actually at home on the 12th against the Broncos. So if he is factoring into that game plan at all, there's no way in hell he's going to be let go to Columbia for that Alabama game. So, you know what? Pipe dream busted.
Yeah. Yeah. But he'll be watching from New York, rooting hard for Mizzou. And, real quickly, talking about former Mizzou quarterbacks, Bo Pebrilla broke Chase Daniels' record last night to break Chase's record from 2008.
Yeah, that's a pretty big accomplishment. And I know Chase was calling a game last night, so he probably didn't see it until late in the evening. But I'm sure he looked at that, probably gave out the congratulations that were well deserved, and then goes, man, all I get to do now is sit back on my millions of dollars of backup quarterback money and call football games. Man, I had a record.
Yep. Something tells me that Chase knew that record got broken as soon as it happened, whether he was watching the Mizzou game, which is very possible because he was doing the late game. Otherwise, one of his former teammates, Jeremy Macklin and Chase Kaufman, one of those guys probably texted him and said, "Hey, guess what? Your record isn't there anymore."
Chase is a great guy, though. Chase is a great guy. So, it's all in jest when you talk about a record of his being taken away. He was a great quarterback, and he went about his NFL career the right way. He got hit as least amount of times as he possibly could and made millions of dollars, and now he's working in broadcasting. So, kudos to Chase Daniel. Love to have him on the show to talk about that at some point. We'll see how that goes. Quickly to wrap up things, Week 4 picks. We both kind of went into this week going, we weren't so thrilled with what we were going with, and that's kind of played out. We're both sitting at 8-6 this week. We've got a couple games left to go. Both of us had the Packers tonight. Both of us have the Broncos tomorrow, and we're split on the Jets and Dolphins game tomorrow night. So that's either going to give you a 2-game lead, or I'm going to be able to pull back to level footing after 4 weeks. So we'll see how that goes. We'll update you guys on how that plays out after the games tomorrow night.
Yeah, sounds good. It's going to be a fun year to do picks, man, because it's just so up in the air every week. And it's just going to get harder as the season goes. So it's going to be fun to keep track of those and, watch our socials because we will keep you updated on how we're doing with all of those.
That we certainly will. Well, Scott, what do you got going on this week? I know Cardinal season is done, so Busch Stadium will be a little bit emptier over the next couple of months. But what do you got coming up this weekend?
This weekend, I will be doing high school football in Washington on Friday night. I'll be at the Borgia game on Friday night doing that against Father Tolton from Columbia. So that'll be a fun game to do. And then doing a couple of softball games on Saturday. So I will be out and about in the area calling some high school sports. What about yourself?
Well, we've got some events going on at Lindenwood this week. We've got women's volleyball. They're raising their OVC tournament championship banner on Thursday night, so we'll have that. Wisconsin, number 20 Wisconsin hockey is in town to face off against Lindenwood men's hockey, and I'll be joining Matt Kenyon on the call on Friday night and Saturday night. We've got a Lindenwood football game on Saturday afternoon against UT Martin. That'll be a big one. And then a doubleheader soccer, men's and women's on Sunday. So a very busy weekend broadcasting and production-wise. I looked at my schedule, and I'll say this. I don't think I have a 4-day stretch of not doing anything until maybe late November, early December. It's going to be a bit of a stretch here.
A little busy this fall there, my friend.
Hey, just trying to stay as busy as possible. We got a lot of potential radio broadcasts coming up as well for men's and women's basketball at Lindenwood. Haven't officially gotten the proposal in yet, but stay tuned because I might get a chance to travel to some unique places again this fall. So just a little tease there on that.
Very nice. And I will actually be at the press conference on Tuesday at Busch Stadium. So be very interested to be in person and see what Shane Bloom has to say. Did I just say Shane? Chaim Bloom, where's my head at? Right? Chaim Bloom as the new general manager of the Cardinals. Sorry, Mr. Bloom. I didn't mean to butcher your name there. I don't know where my brain was. But yeah, I will be there. As
Scott's invitation was just rescinded.
And, get first reaction from people as we see. Yeah, maybe I won't be there now. But yeah, I will be there to see how that all goes and get some reaction from people to see how they what they think of the news of the Cardinals moves or potential moves this offseason.
Well, we will have all of that reaction and content next Sunday here on the Toasted Tavern, as well as more football recaps from the college and NFL fields, and get you prepped for Major League Baseball playoff and so much more. And you got one more thing, Scott?
Nope, just everybody have a good week and follow our socials because we'll be throwing stuff out there all week, different things that are going on in sports. So follow along and pay attention to us.
Well, that'll do it for us tonight. For Scott Tobin, I am Wags. Thank you for joining us tonight. And again, come back next week. We'll be talking Cardinal baseball and the future of the franchise here on the Toasted Tavern.